You know who I'm gonna show you first? Everybody's favorite. Oh, Bob,
Um, and I think sometimes we get confused in thinking that these two stories are completely separate. They're intertwined,
Yeah.
right? And which is why it's possible for me to be a great admirer of George Washington and also acknowledge he was a slaveholder. And that does not negate
I'm an admirer of a slaveholder. Like, huh?
his greatness. It simply acknowledges that there's a profound, deep flaw in these founding fathers who were also geniuses.
These founding fathers who were also geniuses.
Which is true of all of us, right? It's true of every president. It's that we're this mixed bag.
It's true of every president. We're a mixed bag, you know? You got your war crimes, you got a real mixed bag, if you will.
And embody the country's contradictions. And
just incredible logic, right? But I mean, and what's amazing to me, I mean, Obama, we expect it, right? But it's amazing that you do have academic, like, political scientists, like Gerald Horne, for example, who has written about 1776 and, like, actually giving us the language to understand how to frame what 1776 was in the context of struggle of the working class, right? And how it was like a setback for Black and Native people, right? It's amazing that is like, you know, that in our academia now, that's being celebrated as more and more as the proper position. We've seen Gerald Horne cited in so many more works these days, right? But yet you still have, again, Zohran Mamdani here. I love this one. This is even better, almost. Today marks 250 years since a small group of newspaper editors, farmers, and soldiers. Newspaper editors, farmers, and soldiers, you see. That's all they were. A group of newspaper editors, farmers, and soldiers signed a document declaring the nation's independence. The truth that feels self-evident now, but was revolutionary then. Yeah. Yeah. It was revolutionary, you see. Those farmers and those newspaper editors, they thought of it all by themselves, sitting alone in that. No. Obviously, we know that's not the case, right? We know, like, they gave the reason why they had that language in there and even were eventually forced into having a Bill of Rights is because of the tremendous pressure of the masses against them, that they felt them breathing on their necks in a sense, right? So, like, we have to give them something, or else the project of whiteness that we're building falls apart right here, right now. Which at that time, as you know, was a very new project, right? Like, that project of building whiteness as a concept was still in its infancy with 1776 and its emergence. And the whole reason why that occurred was as a way to say, well, here's these other powers, they're arming Black people, they're arming indigenous people, they're using them in militias. You know, who knows what that will mean for us. And, like, 1776 was, on the one hand, a response to that, and on the other hand, a desire to expand Manifest Destiny westward and complete that colonial project. Right? Yeah, they were trying to keep their heads. That's why it being a counter-revolution, Chi-Chi, is so important, right? Because you had, like Gerald Horne rightfully points out, you had Black and indigenous forces that were building. and even gaining allies. Anyway, so then he continues and says, "What a privilege us Americans have to live in a nation that every one of its inhabitants can shape." One's in chat if you feel like you're shaping America right now. What an honor us New Yorkers have to look out over our cities' waters from the shores where so many Americans bravely entered their country for the first time. Today and all days, let us remember that patriotism is not pretending our nation is without flaws. Patriotism is every act of righteous dissent, because loving our country means fighting for the best version of it. Happy 4th of July, New York City. It's not even, like, I hate this even. Like you, I am a proud bourgeois revolutionary of the Burger Reich. It wasn't a bourgeois revolution. We gotta stop saying that. It wasn't a bourgeois revolution, for the love of God. How did the mode of production change in the United States from before 1776 to after? Like, or I guess, what change in production happened in the US that constituted that revolution, and is to make sure that those relations then match the new. Oh yeah, nothing. It was set up as a capitalist slave country. It was a mixed country of slave and capitalist economy. And it was that after 1776 as well. Nothing changed. No means of production changed. No relations of production changed. That's literally not a revolution. It's just simply not, right? Like a bourgeois struggle, I guess. This one's gonna make you even more mad. This is from the next day, yesterday. Happy Venezuelan Independence Day to everyone celebrating across New York City. Today we honor Venezuela's long struggle for self-determination, the generations of people who carried that history with them to our city, and Venezuelans around the world who are still reckoning with the tragic aftermath of the devastating earthquake. What about the president who's locked up in your city? Our heart are with the Venezuelan brothers and sisters during this moment of celebration and struggle. Like, the man has the Venezuelan president locked up in his city, and he didn't even, like, mention that in this. Amazing, huh? Isn't that amazing? He just said they were a dictatorship. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Before Mamdani, or sorry, before fucking Maduro was kidnapped, he was saying it was a dictatorship. Now he's celebrating Independence Day. This is what thanks, Sincho. This is what DSA is. Exactly. Yes, exactly. By the way, can I post the People's Forum fundraiser for Venezuela? Yes, go ahead, Mice. I want to contrast this with something, okay? I have a point to all of this. He also condemned the resistance. The list is so long. I'm gonna tap the sign. Somebody did a redeem earlier, and I actually forgot to give you your communist quote because I have ADHD and I'm always bouncing all over the place. So I'm gonna give it to you right now. This one that I give you all the damn time. You must be sick of this quote by now. But it's one of my favorite quotes. And it describes the difference between Kim Jong-un and Zoran Mamdani in two phrases, two paragraphs. In this, Fidel is the master. His own special way of fusing himself with the people can be appreciated only by seeing him in action. At the great public mass meetings, one can observe something like a dialogue of two tuning forks whose vibrations interact, producing new sounds. Fidel and the mass begin to vibrate together in a growing dialogue of intensity until they reach the climax and an abrupt conclusion crowned by our cry of struggle and victory. The difficult thing to understand for someone not living through the experience of the revolution is this close dialectical unity between the individual and the mass, in which both are interrelated at the same time in which the mass, as an aggregate of individuals, interacts with its leader. Some phenomena of this kind can be seen under capitalism, when politicians appear capable of mobilizing popular opinion. But when these are not genuine social movements, and if they were, it would not be entirely correct to call them capitalists, they live on only so long as the individuals who inspires them, or until the harshness of capitalist society puts an end to the people's illusions. Literally, again, that describes every DSA candidate, essentially. Now, in contrast to those speeches we heard there from Mamdani, I want to read you from Leonard Peltier. Nothing to celebrate at America 250. So here we go. This seems like an apt thing to read. On July 3rd, fireworks will burst over Trincaslia Skepe, the Six Grandfathers, the sacred Lakota mountain the settlers renamed Mount Rushmore. The four presidents blasted into the rock will glow above the Black Rock Hills, land the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty set aside for the Lakota Nation. The U.S. seized Pahasapa, the Black Hills, in 1877, after gold was found there. In 1980, the Supreme Court ruled the taking illegal. The Lakota refused the money the court offered and demanded the land back. They are still waiting. The monument was another conquest. It was designed and directed by Gutzon Borglum, the white supremacist sculptor who began the Stone Mountain Confederate Memorial in Georgia, attended Klan rallies, served on Klan committees, and drew Klan money into that project. His crews used dynamite and drills to turn the Six Grandfathers into a shrine to U.S. presidents. Roughly 500 miles northeast, on the Turtle Mountain Reservation in North Dakota, Leonard Peltier will be in the house, where the federal government keeps him under guard. Peltier, 81, is the longest held Native political prisoner in the United States. He spent nearly 50 years in federal prison for the deaths of 2 FBI agents in a 1975 firefight at Pine Ridge. A case the government fabricated with coerced testimony, suppressed evidence, and a claim it later admitted it could not prove. President Joe Biden commuted his sentence on January 19th, 2025, his last full day in office. Peltier walked out of the penitentiary in Coleman, Florida on February 18th, 2025, and was flown home. He did not walk free. He serves the rest of his life sentence under home confinement. He calls the officer who supervises him his handler. He needs a written pass to travel 100 miles off the reservation, whether for medical care or a ceremony. Diabetes and cataracts have taken most of his eyesight. Visitors keep him fed with salmon, elk, moose, and buffalo. I was taken out of one prison cell and put into another, he told Democracy Now! In an interview aired on September 19th, 2025. A $103 million party for Trump's friends. July 4th, 2026, marks 250 years since the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. The Trump administration has turned the anniversary into a political brand and a cash register. Trump put himself at the head of a Task Force 250 by executive order on January 29, 2025, alongside the congressionally chartered the America 250 Commission. The White House promoted Freedom 250, a Trump-aligned fundraising arm. Watchdogs say government money and private sponsorships have been pushed into Trump-aligned hands. Since October 2025, roughly $103 million in federal contracts and grants has flowed to outfits run by Trump officials and allies. According to a report released in June 2026 by Public Citizen and Revolving Door Project, corporate sponsors are on roll call: the arms industry, big oil, tech, transport, and agribusiness, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Palantir, ExxonMobil, Oracle, United Airlines, John Deere. Most have business pending before the same government staging the celebration. Palantir builds the data systems Immigration and Customs Enforcement uses to track and target immigrants. Access is for sale. $500,000 buys VIP seating. $1 million buys private reception and a photograph with the president. $2.5 million buys a speaking slot on July 4th. Since November 2025, the Interior Department has drained roughly $98 million from national park entry fees to refit the reflecting pool and the monuments around the National Mall. From December 2025 to April 2026, it moved another $68 million into the National Park Foundation, the nonprofit that houses Freedom 250. The festivities open with the tank parade through Washington on June 14, 2025, Trump's birthday. Since then came a cage fight on the White House lawn. In August comes a car race on the National Mall. The fireworks over the stolen Black Hills are the centerpiece. They are also trying to stamp Trump himself into the anniversary. In February 2025, Representative Joe Wilson of South Carolina introduced the, quote, Donald J. Trump $250 Bill Act, directing the Treasury to print a $250 bill bearing Trump's face, and to scrape the 1866 law that keeps living people off U.S. currency. The measure stalled in committee, but Treasury moved anyway. In March 2026, it announced that Trump's signature will appear on newly issued paper money. The first time a sitting president's name has gone on U.S. currency. When the career official running the Engraving Bureau refused to authorize the $250 work as illegal, she was reassigned. A 24-year Army veteran, the first woman to hold the job, she signed off with a note that reportedly read, "The buck stopped here." The party belonging to the ruling class, the state, the war forms, the oil companies, the banks, saluting themselves on land they stole. Selling seats and sponsorships is only part of it. The deeper aim is to make the ruling class versions of history look sacred. Peltier has refused to bless the celebration with his silence. Speaking on Native News Online's Native Bedeske, published in March 2nd, 2026, he said Native people have nothing to celebrate. He pointed to the declaration itself. Its final grievances against the king complained that Britain had brought, quote, the merciless Indian savages against the colonists. In the same breath, it denounced, quote, domestic insurrections, the revolt of enslaved people who sought freedom by fleeing to British lines and taking up arms. That was the founders' fear. Native nations stood in the way of land seizure. Enslaved Africans threatened the slave system. Britain had also blocked settlement west of the Appalachians, where its own royal proclamation had recognized indigenous land claims. The men behind the declaration were slaveholders, merchants, landlords, and land speculators. Oh wait, you mean there weren't newspaper editors, farmers, and what else did he say? Miners or something? The poor miners. Huh, weird. Mamdani just told me they weren't slaveholders, merchants, landlords, and land speculators. Interesting. Right, the farmers, El Samio, he called them. Their independence meant the freedom to keep enslaved people in chains and take native lands. Soldiers, that was it. Thank you, Green Eggs and Hammer. It was soldiers, farmers, and newspaper editors, is how Mamdani described them. Rather than slaveholders, merchants, landlords, and land speculators. The revolution, quote unquote, was also a war for continental expansion. In 1779, Washington ordered the Sullivan Campaign, which burned Haudenosaunee towns, cornfields, orchards, and food stores. The new U.S. government was built for that work. Its army, treaties, courts, and executive power were shaped in the war to siege indigenous land and open it to settlement, speculation, and profit. The same class that took the land and defended slavery still holds power. The U.S. is ruled by billionaires, bankers, landlords, oil companies, and war profiteers. Peltier said Native people should use America 250 to tell the truth. We're no longer going to celebrate a false government until the truth comes out and they apologize to everyone for what they did. He said, maybe we can start all over and build a real government of freedom and equal justice for everybody. Now he's on to something. Complainy says it's wild because Ellis Island is right there. He could have mentioned the concentration camps or something. I mean, Laney, the farmers, newspaper editors, like, come on, like, you couldn't have been any more like the worst. Not even a pandering to the left at all. Just hilarious to me. The underside of freedom. Peltier knows what U.S. government does to his people. He joined the American Indian movement in 1972, when AIM was fighting police violence and the theft of what little land remained. The FBI's COINTEL program targeted Native residents as a movement to be broken. Much like the RCMP did here in Canada, by the way. On Pine Ridge, in the same corner of South Dakota where the fireworks will burn, the FBI, federal authorities, and tribal chair Dick Wilson's goon squad waged what survivors call the Reign of Terror against AIM members, traditionalists, and their supporters. More than 60 were killed between 1973 and 1976. When 2 FBI agents died in the 1975 firefight, the Bureau needed a conviction. It extradited Peltier from Canada on affidavits from a Lakota woman named Myrtle Poorbear, who swore that she was his girlfriend and had watched him shoot the agents. In truth, she had never met him, and she was not on the reservation that day. She later said FBI agents threatened her and her children until she signed. At trial, the judge refused to let the jury hear her take it back. In 1978, the Federal Appeals Court called the government's use of her affidavits, quote, a clear abuse of the investigative process. Then, let the conviction stand. The government told the jury that Peltier executed the 2 agents at point-blank range. Its proof was a single shell casing the government tried to a rifle and claimed it was in Peltier's hands. After the trial, a Freedom of Information Act request turned up an FBI lab report, withheld from the defense, that contradicted the government's claim. A federal appeals court agreed the report had been concealed and refused him a new trial anyway, ruling it would not have changed the verdict. The government that had convicted Peltier of pulling the trigger then admitted it could not say who did. At a 1985 hearing, its own lawyer told the court, quote, we can't prove who shot those agents, unquote. Peltier served half a century because the government needed to break aim and warn every native fighter who came after it. The fight has not stopped. The same state that hunted AIM now sends ICE, FBI, and federal agents against immigrants, Native people, Black communities, anti-war organizers, and everyone else who stands in the way. Tribal governments have warned their members about ICE stops. Some have told ICE to stay off Native land. At Fort Snelling in Minnesota, the U.S. Army held some 1,600 Dakota people, most of them women, children, and elders, in a concentration camp over the winter of 1862 to 63. Many died. Survivors were deported west to reservations. The Minnesota Historical Society calls the stockade a concentration camp and a policy genocide. ICE now runs its operation from that same ground. In January 2026, its agents seized Native people there. One, a U.S. citizen and Red Lake Nation descendant, was held for hours until his mother brought his birth certificate. The old machinery of removal has a new badge. Peltier tied today's immigration raids to a 500-year campaign to drive Native people off their own land. He has watched ICE agents stop Native people on Native ground and demand papers. He praised the young people who refused. Quote, who are you people to come into our country and tell us that we got to show ID? He warned that the government in Washington is reaching for full dictatorship. His message to the next generation was plain. Hold on to language, ceremonies, and history. Then study the enemy. We need to learn that so we know our enemy, and we know how to fight our enemy. The rulers will spend the summer celebrating 250 years of a system built on stolen land and slave labor. Leonard Peltier, locked inside his own home, keeps telling the truth about it. The struggle still goes on for me, he said. I'm not going to give up. Leonard Peltier. Free Leonard Peltier, comrades. Here we go. I'll share this article with y'all in case you want it. I mean, that is kind of how the DSA functions, Kevin. The part of the function is the DSA rather, is essentially to, run PR for the slave empire again and say that it can be reformed into something for people. All right, if you like what we're doing here, comrades, think about, again, supporting the Leaping Larry stream. Your subs, gift subs, donos, all of that goes a very long way to keeping our stream going. I'm gonna tie this, while I was away, not only did we have the Genocide Day in America, we also had Genocide Day in Canada as well. And so, with that in mind, I do want to read a couple passages from this anthology book that we read every year. The tank badge is over. I'm gonna come up with something new, though. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a subathon on Friday. And like do some kind of badge for it, because that the 2 weeks that I was gone really hurt me financially. Big time. Which is why I'm being extra annoying and saying, if you like what we're doing here, think about gifting subs, think about subbing yourself, dropping your Prime, subby, those biddies you might be sitting on, or, best of all, a direct dono. Alright, we're gonna talk about, like I say, while I was gone, it was July 4th, it was also July 1st. And for many of you, no, not a moose, just terrible internet got me. For many of my comrades in the US, you might not realize that Canada's day was July 4th. The day when a bunch of Canadians celebrate their Genocide Day is July 1st. And then a couple days later, we get to watch y'all do it as well. So, since that's the case, we're going to also read about Canada Day today as well. Bugga, you really gotta stop your badness.
New tip from Eerie Whoosh. Eerie Whoosh supported with 20.
Oh, yo, Eerie Whoosh, thank you so much for the $20 dono. Very much appreciate that, comrade. That means a ton. Thank you, Eerie. Now, if Bugga would behave, look at her. You can tell she doesn't want to behave. You can tell, look. Tell me she's not planning something here, chat. Tell me this is not the face of someone planning something. Okay, you gonna listen up, Bug? Okay, Bug is listening too. Here we go.
New tip from Complainy.
Oh my god, Complainy!
10.
Thank you so much for the $10 to the Larry family. That's right. It's a little bit of reparations for those settlers. If you want some direct reparation that literally goes to keeping land in our hands, right there. Do like Complainy and Eerie did. The first faint trail of the people. Oh, I guess Bugga moved on me. That's a funny part. It's technically not an Independence Day, which is why it's Canada Day. Y'all swear to monarchs overseas still. That's true. That's true. My head of state is King Charles still. One of the oldest accepted prehistoric sites in Nova Scotia was discovered in Debert, and it dates back 10,600 years. The site was found during the 1940s, while the grounds were being used by the DND as a training ground for the Second World War. It wasn't excavated into the mid 1960s when Canadian archaeologist George MacDonald determined the age of the camp by carbon dating artifacts found there. 7 other prehistoric sites have been identified in the Maritimes at Dartmouth, Yarmouth, and Armagh in Nova Scotia, Quaco Head, Kingsclear, and Hogan Millen in New Brunswick, and Souris in Prince Edward Island. Scientists disagree on who the inhabitants of these early sites were, but some Mi'kmaq believe their ancestors had to have been here, at least that early, in order to develop the complex system of social rules already in place by the time the first white people arrived. Before Europeans arrived, the entire maritime region east of the St. John River and west of the St. Lawrence was known as Mugambe. The Mi'kmaq who lived there had rules in place to regulate everything, from sports to politics. The educational system was the link to survival. Through the development of specialized hunting skills, the making of traditional equipment, and the creation of traditional clothing from the skins of animal. How old is like Montezuma Castle? It's ridiculous. There's just gorgeous ruins dotting the US, and rednecks are just getting drunk and shooting at them when they'd get there on their knees and worship a random British place. Yep, Dorco, exactly. And thank you for not catching yourself there. The social system included the concept of sharing, the practice and respect of ceremonies and various songs, chants, and dances accompanying wedding, funeral, and other traditional ceremonies that Mi'kmaq people practiced, along with the involvement in competitive traditional sports like canoeing, waltz, and traditional dice game, and archery. The economic system was cooperative, and everything from the quest and distribution of food and trading goods to the consumption of wealth. The political system was democratic and people-oriented. Yes, I have now locked because the split for me, when your contribution, your split is so much better when you sub at tier 3. I have indeed locked the use of the AI of Stalinbot behind a tier 3 subby to the channel. If you want to use Stalinbot, consider gifting a gate 3. Consider getting a tier 3 subby here. Tier 3 because that gives me 70% of your contribution. It also keeps the chat less cluttered that way. So, if Comrade Steel is still there, you just need a tier 3 subby to use it. Oh, is fish? Well, I'll deal with that after. The Mi'kmaq system consisted of 7 autonomous districts. Each of the districts was made up of several small villages. Each village had a chief, who was chosen for his ability and knowledge of the territory. Each district chose a chief for his ability to lead men and inspire confidence, his territorial knowledge, his understanding of the seasonal habits of animals, and his skills as a good spokesman. There were also regular council meetings held in the Great Lakes region, now known as Ontario. Council discussions were recorded on wampum belts, kept by each tribe to record its history. Tribe members would attach rows of colored shells to the belts as a way of recording what went on at the meetings. The Mi'kmaq was last seen at Chapel Island in the 1940s and is shown in a photograph on display at the Nova Scotia Museum of Natural History. Where it went after the picture was taken is anybody's guess. Which now brings us to the post-contact era. On July 13th, 1713, the French and English crowns signed the Treaty of Utrecht. The King of France gained sovereignty over the islands of Saint Jean, PEI, and Ile Royale, Cape Breton. The remainder of the land was to be taken by the King of England, once boundaries in Acadia were decided on. Puzzled Mi'kmaq chiefs sent messengers to the French lieutenant governor in Quebec to ask how their land could be divided up without their involvement. They were told that the treaties applied only to the land occupied by fortifications and settlements. But the query began a trek towards a long chain of treaties, acts, and agreements outlining what rights and land would be left to the maritime Aboriginal people. On November 12th, 1722, chiefs signed terms and conditions of submissions with the Lieutenant Governor of Annapolis Royal for the return and release of women and children held hostage. By December 15th, 1725, articles of peace had been concluded in Boston between the English and the Abenakis, Melcite and the Mi'kmaq nations, beginning with the Treaty of 1725, signed and ratified in Annapolis in 1726, and also in 1728, with representatives of the Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet. These were the start of various peacekeeping treaties, better known as Articles of Peace and Friendship. These treaties were to render the Mi'kmaq neutral in the struggle between the French and English for the possession of Acadia. In July 1749, an English expedition, commanded by Colonel Edward Cornwallis, arrived in Chebucto Bay, now known as Halifax. He carried with him instructions from the Lord of Trade and Plantations to develop good relations with the inhabitants and enter into treaties with several native nations. Only the Maliseet entered into a treaty with Cornwallis. The Mi'kmaq refused to sign, and in September 1749 declared war on the English. The chiefs restated their by now familiar position that the land belonged to the Mi'kmaq, and they would not abandon it without a fight. In retaliation, Cornwallis issued a proclamation on October 2nd, 1749, ordering that all Mi'kmaq be treated as rogues and ruffians. The Mi'kmaq War of Resistance raged on without a break until September 14th, 1752, when District Chief Jean-Baptiste Cope proposed to the governor and the Council of Halifax that compensation be paid for any more Mi'kmaq land taken by the English. The governor refused the proposal, but made a counteroffer. As a result, on November 22nd, 1752, District Chief Jean-Baptiste Cope returned with several members of his tribe to sign the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. The treaty promised the right to hunt and fish as usual, and trade, and ratification of the treaty each October 1st. The treaties of 1725, 1726, and 1728 were renewed. On the 9th of July, 1776, The Watertown Treaty was signed by a delegation of 10 Mi'kmaq and Maliseet chiefs. Mi'kmaq at large did not support the Watertown Treaty. Several years later, on December 17th and 1783, the government set aside 9 licenses for occupations: Stewiacke, Remsheg, Antigonish, River Phillip, Mirigamish, Macan, and Shubenacadie River, and at St. David's Bay. In 1801, the Nova Scotia colonial government set aside additional parcels of land, consisting of about 9,960 acres in various counties. By March 15, 1842, the legislature had passed the act to provide for instruction the permanent settlement of Indians, to prevent further encroachment of non-natives on Indian reservations, and to solicit public support for the idea that Mi'kmaq should submit to civilization and to live on reserve. On April 13th, 1852, the Lieutenant Governor vested the title of all Indian reserve lands with the Commissioner of Crown Lands for Nova Scotia. However, little action was taken to prevent further encroachment upon the Indian reserves, despite the authority given under the 1842 Act. Then in March 1859, the Nova Scotia government passed the Act concerning Indian reserves. The Act continued the powers of supervision and management of reserve lands by local commissioners. Nova Scotia transferred its responsibility for Indians to the Dominion of Canada in 1867, under the British North American Act. The Mi'kmaq people were now wards of the federal government. In the report of the Indian Affairs Branch of June 30th, 1870, Secretary of State Joseph Howe wrote that 3 schools had been established in Nova Scotia for Mi'kmaq students, and that they were still attempting to encourage Mi'kmaq people to live on reserves and give up their migratory habits. Which now brings us to the post-Confederation era. Most changes to the Indian Act after Confederation were based on the belief Indians could be integrated with white communities. Within 2 years, Mi'kmaq and other tribes were faced with the Enfranchisement Act of 1869, which was intended to free the Indians from wardship under the federal government. However, it was also designed to effect gradual assimilation, only after the Indians could manage the ordinary affairs of the white man. The 1869 Act also stipulated that Indian women who married non-Indian men and their children lost their right to be status Indians. In 1876, the Indian Act consolidated several laws already on the books of the Dominion of Canada and the old provinces of Upper and Lower Canada. Unfortunately, that act created the framework for Indian legislation, which remains fundamentally intact in today's Indian Act. An amendment to the 1911 Indian Act gave expropriation powers to all companies, municipalities, and authorities with necessary statutory powers to expropriate as much reserve land as necessary for public works. The same Indian Act dealt with expropriation of reserves that were near or within towns or cities of more than 8,000 white people. Further amendments to the Indian Act also provided for forced removal of Indians from reserve lands and the sale of these reserves. Between 1919 and 1933, approximately 3,500 acres were surrendered here in Nova Scotia. At the same time, the Department of Indian Affairs was increasing the size of several reserves in Nova Scotia. As early as 1918, the Department of Indian Affairs began to discuss what later became known as centralization policy, a concept which would attempt to relocate Mi'kmaq to two large areas, Eskasoni and Shubenacadie. That's how my family came to be in this location. Centralization was meant to allow for greater efficiency to government employees, more control over the native population, and opportunity for education, as in the case of Catholic Residential School in Shubenacadie, and two central land bases which would allow many smaller parcels to be absorbed into the public land base. Because many Mi'kmaq did not want to uproot their families, lose their land and their way of life to share communities and services with other tribes, centralization attempts did not go smoothly. While some Mi'kmaq were moved, centralization was finally abandoned in 1949, resulting in the various settlements we see today throughout Nova Scotia. Discussion began in 1956-58 of dividing Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq into individual bands and allowing them to administer unoccupied reserves within their regions. In 1960, the provincial government created 11 bands with assigned land holdings. Later, 2 others were recognized: Acadia near Yarmouth in 1965 and Horton in the Annapolis Valley in 1984. Aboriginal people were granted the right to vote in federal elections for the first time in 1960. The paper was seen as a betrayal by the entire consultation process of the 60s and was scrapped. Sorry, I missed a part here. After the right to vote was granted. Later in that same decade, the Indian Affairs Minister, Jean Chrétien, began further talks to revise the Indian Act. As a result, in 1969, Ottawa reintroduced the White Paper on Indian Policy, designed to eliminate the Indian Act, end federal responsibility for Indians, and terminate special status for Indian people. The new policy would also cancel previous treaties and wipe out related land. The paper was seen as a betrayal of the entire consultation process of the 1960s and was scrapped by Pierre Trudeau in 1970. However, a new era of Indian government relations had been ushered in, clouded from the Indian perspective by the fear that the 1969 policy proposals would gradually be implemented through the back door. In 1969, the Union of Nova Scotia Indians was founded. Composed of all chiefs, this organization became the native political body for the province, and in 1970 began delivering programs of concern to the Mi'kmaq community. The repatriation of the Canadian Constitution in 1982 affirmed Aboriginal and treaty rights, encouraging the many developments we see today regarding self-government and land claim settlements. In 1986, the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq became the first tribal council in Nova Scotia. It provides advice and delivers programs to its members. In 1993, a forum was established among the federal, provincial, and First Nations leadership. Which brings us to today. So there's a little of the real history of Nova Scotia for you. What do you all think? I've got more here for you too. Just let me find the next part that I wanted to do here. I like this side of you. Well, thank you, Lasso. Okay, just trying to find this other part. Here we go. Yep. Okay, here's the next part. Before we do this part, there is a poem here that I want to read to you. Let's see, does this have an author? Yes. Okay, I'm going to read to you a poem here before we do the next part of history. This is by Mary Louise Martin, a Mi'kmaq woman. This is her poem. I'm going to do two. These are both from 1996. This is her poem called A Warrior. A warrior has a worthy opponent to live and learn from opposition, to keep the inner balance. A warrior in times of peace, to gather, to retreat, to wear the sacred feathers earned in worlds of sacred harmonies. A warrior to seek spirit guidance in prayers in all that is related, to open to the soft whisperings of the wind's song, to accept the offerings of courage, wisdom, serenity. A warrior to be of one with sweet solitude, learning the language of the winged ones, the dancing trees and falling waters, to sing in their tongue the songs of Earth Mother. A warrior to be of the ordinary, to remain noble to humble beauty, to burn the sacred smudge alone, cleansing body, mind, and soul, to slip into sleeping hours without human fears. A warrior to play upon the drum, to create heartbeat of the mother as one. Insig Nogyamna, all our relations. Latsu says, keep in mind, people, us natives were not free to leave the open-air concentration camps called reservations till the 60s and 70s without permission from the white man. Yep. Okay, and then the other one I want to do here, also from her. This one is untitled, from the same poet. I, Mi'kmaq, live and dream, land of the haunting beauty of the birches. Moon, grandmother moon speaks. Pearls of cloud ones grace the night sky and surround her, and pass her by. Her nightlight dances on the silver birch bark. Mi'kmaq,
New
I
tip
live
from my
and
Serena.
dream.
Mycelium supported with 5.
Yo, Mycelium, thank you so much for the $5 support, the direct dono. Appreciate that so much. Thank you, thank you. Migama, I live and dream. Dusty roads, wild berries, red earth, alder and sweet fern bushes. I dance, alone, alone I dance. Under night skies, for the sacred beauty and strength of what lives and dies. Within and all around, at every moment of our human time. I, Migama, live and dream. Wilalin Niskum. A very kind mushroom indeed. All right. She has such lovely. I could read you all of her poems. She has such great ones. There is another poet here, though. Shirley as well. I want to do one from Shirley. Also, this is from Shirley Kujukiwa. Yeah, there's two here from her that I want to do. The first one from her I want to do is called The Inner Spirit. When I was but a young girl, I looked at life with little meaning. The hopes and dreams of my roots were hidden by elements of abuse. There was no comfort or warmth for my nativeness to grow and flourish. For the harshness of cold winds and icy stares hid the beauty within.
Threads of Solidarity supported with 10.
Thank you so much, Threads of Solidarity. Your support means a ton, comrade. Thank you, thank you. Seriously, it goes a very long way. I'm gonna read this one from the start. I know as soon as I see the titles of some of these, they get me going. Okay, The Inner Spirit. When I was but a young girl, I looked at life with little meaning. The hopes and dreams of my roots were hidden by elements of abuse. There was no comfort or warmth for my nativeness to grow and flourish. For the harshness of cold words and icy stares hid the beauty within. My struggle to survive became unbearable with each day of my developing years. The ray of new hope has brightened my gloomy hours of untold despair. Now I stand tall and proud as it gives true meaning to empty dreams. Its tears have quenched my thirst for knowledge of who I am. It speaks words to enlighten my quest, to bring forth my being with strength. The warmth of its smile has filled me with anticipation to cry out, I too belong. And this one is kind of connected to that. This one is called The Spirit Cries. Spirits of my ancestors, hear my Migama spirit cry, for I still carry great pain from deep within my heart. My lips still taste the bitterness of silent tears as I cringe from hate muttered by others. And my spirit cries out, wanting to be free. Spirits of my ancestors, hear my Mi'kmaq spirit cry, in hopes of healing the wounds of broken dreams. To see not only the ugliness that surrounds me, but also to feel the beauty of life. Let me speak not in shame, but with dignity, for my spirit cries out, longing to be free. I'm glad you're here to relate, Lasso. Seriously. Okay. That brings us to the next part that I want to read here. I'm just looking for the part that comes after this. Here we go. Okay. Whew. I think this is. I don't think we can talk about Canada Day without reading this part as well. I got a lot of reading to do to you people today. This next part is from Noel Knockwood. Speaking on human rights violations, cultural genocide, the loss of land of the Aboriginal Indigenous people. Starting with human rights violations. Since time immemorial, humans have dominated and colonized others, often at a great cost to the victims, the loss of their homeland. Vast areas of North America were governed and ruled by the Aboriginal people who lived in harmony with nature and humankind. We were nations of people, speaking our own languages and practicing our own religious rites and beliefs. Then the Europeans arrived. Since colonization, indigenous people in the Americas have suffered gross and widespread human rights violations. Human rights abuses against indigenous people often arise out of disputes over land, resource use, or ownership. Indigenous people are more vulnerable to abuses and less able to seek redress than others because of racial prejudice, discrimination. Discrimination may also be reflected in the criminal justice system. One case in Canada where racial discrimination was found to have been a factor was that of Mi'kmaq Indian Donald Marshall Jr., convicted of murder in Nova Scotia in 1971. He was released in 1982 after new evidence emerged that another man had been responsible for the crime. A royal commission, where I was the translator, Noel Knockwood says, examined the case and found that there had been errors and misconduct by the prosecution, and that, quote, seemingly unconscious racism and racial stereotyping played a part in Donald Marshall's conviction, which had occurred, in part at least, because he was a Native person. Helen Betty Osborne, a 19-year-old Cree Indian from Norway House community in Manitoba, was murdered in 1971. It was not until 1986, 16 years later, that one of 4 men implicated in her killing was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. The Aboriginal Justice Inquiry reported in 1991 that several aspects of the police investigation were marred by racist attitudes. That Helen Betty Osborne's murder was motivated by racism. That neither the Department of Indian Affairs nor the Royal Canadian Mounted Police had exercised due vigilance to protect the young Indian woman from racial and sexual harassment, which they were known to suffer from in the past, the town where the girl was murdered, and that the jury, which had no Aboriginal members, was not representative of the community where the trial was held. On July 11th, 1990, a situation began. Perhaps some of you have heard of this event. I'm sure actually this is probably the event more of you have heard about regarding Canada than any other event in this category. I would wager. On July 11th, 1990, a situation began in the town of Oka, Quebec, which includes the Kaneshtake Reserve. The dispute was over land. The bones of the Mohawk dead were piled on top of one another in a tiny graveyard just off the highway west of the town of Oka. It is between the driveway of the Oka Golf Club and the club's parking lot. The cemetery has been left with no room to expand. The graves are tightly packed together, and stray golf balls are sometimes found strewn among the decaying headstones of this Christian burial ground. The ninth hole is just a few meters away. The names on the headstones tell the genealogy of the Mohawk people. The encroachment of the golf course on the Mohawk graves became for them a symbol of the relentless appetite of developers. The Mohawk crisis began. Lua Strona, welcome in. This is called the Megama Anthology. We're reading right now from a Noel Knockwood piece, though, which is included in this. On August 14th, 1990, an international team of observers signed a protocol agreement with the federal and provincial governments and the Mohawk Nation. On August 24th, a car carrying human rights observers tried to enter the reserve. When the car was attacked by a group of men armed with baseball bats. The police and soldiers standing a few meters away did nothing to stop the attack, and the car was forced to retreat. The team of observers later returned at dawn after the mobs had left. Later in the day, they were airlifted. On August 27th, when Premier Robert Bourassa announced that the official negotiations with the Mohawks were over, the Premier asked the international observers to leave. In Paris, the International Federation of Human Rights began assembling a team of 24 observers to monitor the crisis at Oka. Federation President Jean-Claude Fourque, who made an 8-day tour of the two Mohawk settlements, Kaneshtake and Kahnawake, said he had found evidence of more than 50 human rights violations. In about half of the cases, non-natives were the victims. Mohawks were the victims in the other cases. With the arrival of the Europeans came disease, death, and destruction. Chickenpox, smallpox, measles claimed thousands and thousands of lives. Alcohol, ammunition, and aggression were parts of that experience. As these foreigners came to our sacred homeland, they brought with them the 3 M's: the merchant, the military, and the missionary. The merchants exploited my people through the fur trade. The military raided our communities and killed men, women, and children. And the missionary declared our holy rituals and sacred ceremonies to be barbaric. They told my forefathers not to believe in Jigdanism, in the Great Spirit, for they had come with the true teaching of God. The missionaries could not understand our concept of God. Ganishniga. They paid no attention to our beliefs. And on June 24th, 1610, the first Mi'kmaq Grand Tree was baptized into a foreign faith known as Christianity. Today, some of our elders claim that the Christian ritual known as baptism is an undisguised attempt to assimilate the natives by taking away our original names and replacing them with Christian names. The evidence I produce you is my name, Noel. They went as far as saying that our language was savage-like, and for us not to speak Mi'kmaq, the language given to us by the Great Spirit. We have paid until we could not pay any more. We even paid with our land. There was a time when my forefathers owned this great land. Their domain was the rising to the setting sun. They had uncontested sovereignty over the land and resources. They lived in peace and tranquility, and they respected differences in languages and values. They honored all life and plants, insects, birds, fish, animals, and other human beings. They called their land Mother Earth. Chief Seattle made a speech in 1884, and these are his words. Quote, "Teach your children what we have taught our children, that what earth is our mother. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons of the earth. If men sit upon the ground, they sit upon themselves. This we know, the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. Man did not weave the web. He is merely a strand of it. Whatever he does to the earth, he does to himself. Contaminate your bed, and you will one night suffocate in your own waste." One thing we do know, which the white man may someday discover: our God is the same God. You may think you own him, as you wish to own your land, but you cannot. He is the God of man, and his compassion is equal for the red man and the white man. This earth is precious to him, and to harm the earth is to heap contempt on his creation. This is our land. This is our home, and we are descendants of the Aboriginal people. That's Chief Seattle's speech in 1884. How did we lose our land? Some lands were given away as land grants for the European settlers by absentee landlords. Some lands were taken by sheer use and occupancy. Other lands were taken by treaty violations. As long as the waters flow or grasses grow upon the earth, or the sun rises to show you the pathway, or you kindle your campfires, so shall you be protected by this government and never again be removed from your present habitations. Senator Sam Houston of Texas said this in a discourse to the U.S. Congress in 1884, describing what was to have been the perpetual nature of the reservation created for the U.S. Indians. Similar treaties were signed in Canada. Of all the treaties that were signed by the white Europeans, not one treaty was kept. As for the Aboriginal people, or nations, not one treaty was broken. Mi'kmaq treaties are a manifestation of British Indian policy. By deliberate design, the covenant chain bound the crown to protect us and our ancestral lands. From this pre-Confederation obligation flows Canada's responsibility for, quote, Indians and land reserved for Indians. Although the Crown has not acted expressly to limit or terminate Mi'kmaq treaty rights, it has never approved any legislation that does so. The Canadian government remains slow to fulfill the moral and legal obligations with respect to our rights. As yet, Mi'kmaq have not been compensated for the lands and resources that were unjustly taken from us, and which Britain once so eagerly admitted were our natural entitlements. The treaty between the Mi'kmaq Nation and the British Crown was signed in 1752 and is yet binding today. At that time, the Mi'kmaq occupied the lands known today as Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and the Gaspé Peninsula in the province of Quebec, and sections of Newfoundland. The Treaty of 1752 did not cede any land to the European settlers, for it was a treaty of peace and friendship, with no land surrenders. With that historical premise, all of these lands mentioned are being occupied illegally, and the Mi'kmaq people have never been compensated for the use and occupancy of our ancestral land. From time immemorial, our forefathers have lived in this land. This is our land. This is our home. Our history and our allegiance is to this land and to no other. Today, we still live in this land that belonged to our forefathers, that still belongs to us, and that we will pass on to our children yet unborn. Our existence in this land predates the coming of European explorers and immigrant settlers. Our existence in this land predates the establishment of colonial settlements and governments by Europeans. Our existence in this land predates the Confederation of Canada. That's why we do this on July 1st. Before the English and French came, we were here. We are pre-Confederation nation of peoples. Prior to the coming of European immigrants, our ancestors exercised all the prerogatives of nationhood. All of them. Because we were a nation. Not a tribe, a nation. That's a message to all of my anarchist fucking... Nope. Prior to the coming of European immigrants, our ancestors exercised all the prerogatives of nationhood. We had our land and our own system of land holding. We made and enforced our own laws in our own ways. The various tribal nations dealt with one another according to accepted codes. We respected our distinctive languages. We practiced our own religious beliefs and customs. We developed our own set of cultural habits and practices according to our particular circumstances. We, in fact, had our own special political, economic, educational, and property systems. We exercise the rights and prerogatives of a nation and the existence of a nation. It was a nation. It was as a nation our forefathers dealt with the European immigrants. It is as a nation we exist today. It is our desire and our intent to continue to exist as a nation of Mi'kmaq people. As nations of Indian peoples or Indian nations, our rights and entitlements to this land were inherited from our forefathers. Our rights to the ownership of the land precede and supersede the claims upon our land by the Europeans. We have prior rights of ownership by prior occupation and rightful inheritance. Our ownership and entitlements to this land do not arise by virtue of any land granted to us by foreign sovereigns or the Europeans or their succeeding governments. Rather, the European immigrants and their descendants live in this land by virtue of the rights we granted them. The rights granted them were merely the rights to use and share the land with us. Vast portions of this land still remain Indian land. Our continued ownership and rightful use of our lands has not been terminated. Even though succeeding governments of our European immigrants attempt to dispossess us by seizing and claiming all our lands, we maintain the European peoples and their succeeding governments have not, at any time or in any way, rightfully acquired these lands. We further maintain we are deserving of the recognition, restoration, and compensation for the wrongful seizure of our lands and resources therein. We will continue to inhabit, occupy, and use these lands for our survival and subsistence, according to the rights we have inherited from our forefathers. We have paid a very grave and exorbitant price. We face the danger of being wrongfully dispossessed of much of our own land. Our religious beliefs and practices were outlawed, and we were denied the use of our language. Our music, dances, and arts were declared barbaric. We were prohibited to live and practice according to our own cultural customs. Our entire way of life, based on the land, was endangered and weakened by deliberate acts of destruction of the animals which sustained us, and our movements were restricted so that our survival was made perilous and precarious. Yet we have survived. We have not perished. We have not vanished. We are not also merely people of the past. We are of this land today, and we will be of this land in the time yet to come. Our survival in our land today is still perilous and precarious. If we are to survive as a people in the future, to be strong and independent as we once were, we must develop and strengthen our existence with this special relationship within the European in this land today. Therefore, let it always be known, as it has always been known and accepted by us, that we are a nation of Indian people, and that we declare and proclaim a special relationship within the Canadian Federation. This is the understanding that exists in the minds and hearts of our people today. From Noel Knockwood. Okay, and I have one more part that I want to read to you, comrades. No, no problem. I'm glad that you're all here to hear. This is where it's gonna get bad. We'll see how much of this I can do. This is the longest part. We might do a break in between or something. But I do at least want to read some of this to you. This is Isabel Knockwood. And this is taken from her book called Ode of the Depths. I appreciate that, Sue. Thank you. Thank you. That does mean a ton. Okay. This is Isabel Knockwood from her book Ode of the Depths. Rewards and punishments. I remember those horrible years as if it were yesterday. There was one nun, Sister Gilberta. She always passed out the punishment. Every day, she would take me into the bathroom and lock the door. She would then proceed to beat me 30 times on each hand, 3 times a day with a strap. She would count to 30 out loud each time she hit me. It's an awful way to learn to count to 30. My older sister Grace learned to count to 50. I never understood why I had to get those beatings, but at the age of 37, I realized it had to be because I spoke my language. To this day, I can't speak my language very well, but I do understand when I am spoken to in Mi'kmaq. Why was our culture and language such a threat that had to be taken away from us with such vengeance? To be taught your language with respect and kindness by your people, then to have the white man pull it from your heart with meanness and torture. Some people wonder why we are so tough. Because we had to be. We had no choice. I have polio, and it affected my bladder, and as a child, I wet my pants a lot. I received extra beatings for that too. Once, I was thrown across the dorm floor by Sister Gilberta. At the age of 6, it seemed far away. I bounced off the wall at the other end of the dorm. I was sore on one side of my body for a few days. Testimony by Imelda Brooks, Big Cove, New Brunswick. Next we got this is gonna be from Rita Joe. I don't remember ever receiving any rewards from any nun for anything I have ever done, except for the laundry. I helped in the laundry, and the nun there was very good to me. And every morning, she would give me one piece of candy or chocolate. She just did it, I think, from the goodness of her heart, and I always did my work, whether I received a reward or not. I think the sister was trying to get a good relationship based on good terms. Love, respect, and admiration which I gave her. When I went to visit her, she was 80 years old. Exactly. And she was so glad to see me. She just cried and held out her arms. And I went into them and we hugged each other and her tears mingled. I went to visit that sister because of that friendship established many years ago. I saw the favorites and the pets get rewards of ribbon candy, bread, jam, medals, and holy cards. And to the children who never received presents at Christmas time, those things meant a lot. One thing I can say about the sister on the girl's side is that she let me have skates when I was 15. 1 year away from going home for good. During summer vacation, she tried not to be as mean as during the school year. She held back her anger and didn't scold as much. She let us get away with little things like sleeping in. They took us to Grand Lake once. We had to pick blueberries. When we had a bowl full of blueberries, she rewarded us with candy. A BB sucker. One candy. A BB sucker. I have to think really hard to remember the rewards. Rita Joe. Rather than trying to inspire us to be creative or to motivate us to do well, the teachers at the school relied on orders, threats, and ridicule. They had no interest, apparently, in anything we might have thought or felt. Such rewards were meted out depending on the nun's whims. Even if you won something by chance, it could be snatched away from you. I remember there was a bingo for someone's leftover Christmas present, and we all sat around to try and win a surprise that Kiku had. I didn't really care what it was as long as I won. I was set for B15, but she called B14, and I got so excited I went, phew, that was close. And I blew all the pieces of paper I was using for markers off the card. Everyone sitting at my table started to help me get them back on when the older girl reminded us, quote, "You don't have to do that. Just wait for one number." Just then we heard B15 called. Everyone started yelling, "Bingo! Isabel got bingo!" Kiku took out a white fur hat and he said, "Here's your prize. Come over and try it on." I walked over and she put it on my head and tied the furry tassels under my chin. "Turn around and let me see what you look like." Then she made a funny face and said, "That hat does not look nice on you. Girls, do you think this hat looks good on Isabel?" And all of the little girls looked at me, then at her, with a puzzled look, but didn't say anything. "No," she continued, the conversation with herself. "She does not look nice at all. Isabel, do you want to wear a hat that does not look nice on you?" "No, sister. I didn't much care what it looked like. All I knew was that it felt nice and warm and furry." "Okay, take it off, Margaret. Take it off. Margaret, come over and try on this hat. I think it will look nice on you." As a child? Sorry, Chet. As a child, I lived in perpetual fear of saying and doing anything, even if it was good. For if my work was too good, I knew that it would bring the response, "Who do you think you are? You think you're such a big shot?" And I was always afraid to do my best. If I knew my work was good, I made sure that I didn't finish it. Then the nun could only yell, "Why didn't you finish the job I asked you to do?" To me, that was better than being ridiculed. Remember the incident that taught me this. We were given the task of embroidering the altar cloth with fine designs of grapes, roses, and flowers, and with little crosses along the edges. Pauline Johnson was very artistic and adept with her hands, and her work was excellent. Sewing was no effort for her, and she would chat and sew merrily along, while the rest of us struggled with threading fine needles and got all tangled up. In no time, she had a whole section finished. Kiku came down from her prayers and examined her work. When she saw that Pauline had done, she was furious. Instead of being pleased and praising her, she began yelling, "Who told you to continue sewing? You did not have my permission to sew this much, so rip it all up again, and we'll see who the smart one around here is. You sit there looking so proud of yourself. You look as proud as Lucifer. Say it! I'm as proud as Lucifer." Pauline mumbled, "I'm as proud as Lucifer." QQ said, "Say it louder so everyone can hear you. Here, stand on the bench and say it so the girls in the back of the room can hear you." There always seemed to be something arbitrary about the way the treats were handed out. I remember Kiku walking into the recreation hall with a bowl of candy or peanuts and throwing a handful of goodies on the floor, while she stood and watched us scramble for them. Was never good at scrambling. She always came in unexpectedly, while we were busy knitting or playing. Other times, she'd walk in the hall with a plate piled high with toast covered with jam, which was left over from the sisters' dining room. We would stand around looking at the plate, hoping to get a slice. She would call each girl by name, and they'd step up one by one and walk away with their bread, while the rest of us waited for our turn, which sometimes never came. Excuse me one sec. That's why I didn't do this one last year. There was no recognition for our service, for achievement, or for work completed, or well done. We received no certificates, diplomas, or awards for school grades, promotion, arts, or sports. The only real recognition was to crown the statue of the Virgin Mary during the annual May procession, or to read the accompanying prayer, or to sing solo at midnight mass. Once the girl choir won the prize of the best choir in the Hants County schools and was invited to sing on the CBC Halifax program Fireside Frolics. The trophy was presented to Sister Gilberta and displayed in a case in the front of the hall leading to the chapel for 1 year. It was only a loan, and after the year was up, had to be returned to the school board. Russell Brooks, who was a student after the war, recalls seeing a scroll that held all the names of the former students who had served in the military and had been killed during World War II. For a long time, it hung on the wall leading to the chapel, but when the school was closed down, the scroll was never found. I remember singing solo one Christmas Eve, "O Holy Night," and "Adeste Fidelis." In the afternoon, I developed a cold and had to suck on a lemon and go to bed early. At 11, they woke me up, gave me some cocoa, and I sang like an angel. Mommy and Daddy were in the audience as well as several other people from the reserve. Frankly, I was not the best singer they could have chosen. Most of the other girls had better singing voices and a better sense of rhythm than I. Although I do have a good ear, and I know a good singer when I hear one. I often wonder why Leona Capeg wasn't picked. After a while, it dawned on me that favoritism had more to do with the selection of soloists than singing ability. The fact that my parents were regular visitors at the school not only saved me from many punishments, but also meant that I was sometimes singled out for preferential treatment. However, I was never picked for the supreme honor of crowning Mary. 1 year, that was decided by election, and Nora Bernard remembers being voted by her peers as the one to do the honors. This is from her. "It was my last year there, and we had elections and I was voted as the favorite. Sister Mary Charles did not take the news too well, and called me into her office, and told me why I should give my votes to Lillian, so she'd have something to remember the school by. So instead of being given the honor I was due, I was allowed to read the valedictory, which meant nothing to me. I was so jealous. I was wishing the statue would topple over, or that Lillian would slip, or something. If the rewards were meager and slow in coming, the punishments were plentiful and swift. By the early 1950s, the school's reputation had spread throughout the native community, so that on many reserves, "Don't do that or you'll be sent to Shuby" was the standard threat to children. The school was so strongly associated with punishment in children's mind that those who were sent to Shuby as a result of their family circumstances constantly wondered what crime they had committed. For many of them, the school's reputation as a place of punishment proved all too accurate. Throughout both Father McKay's and Father Collins' regimes, the biggest crime was running away. Runaways were brought back in a cop car by the RCMP. Their heads were shaved, and they were kept in a dark room or a soap closet, sometimes for several days and nights. They were strapped and fed only dry bread and water. In one case, the boys were tied to a chair and left there for 2 days. Matthew Thomas and his wife, Katie Kopak, were both students in 1934 when Bruce Labrador and Joe Tony ran away and were brought back. They told me that the two boys had their heads shaved and had their hands tied behind their backs. They were strapped to a chair with the Bible on their laps, which they were supposed to read. They had to sit in the broom closet all day and all night and all the next day without permission to go to the bathroom. These were Father McKay's orders. Then they ran away again and were brought back did the same thing happen. Peter Julian recalls the treatment given to runaways. Quote, "When I first landed there, I think it was the first time I had ever seen my brother Joe, and I had heard he ran away. He was picked up by the RCMP and brought back. Sister Paul of the Cross stripped him down to the waist and shaved off all his hair. Bald. I was just a young boy, and I pitied my brother, but I didn't dare cry. They had a closet which they called the dark hole that had no windows, and it was just located just underneath the steps, where they locked runaways and bad kids, and the only time they saw any light was when the meals of dry bread and water were served to them. They were taken from there and up to McKay to given the same type of beating that I got. I don't know how long they were put on this bread and water, sometimes maybe a week, and very light food after. There were quite a few boys who ran away, and every one of them got the same treatment when they returned. The sister had the same kind of strap as Father McKay's. I remember Peter Michael Stevens was acting the fool one evening in the dormitory, and when he was told to keep quiet, he kept it up. So he was told to pull his pants and his underwear down and lay across his bed. Sister Paul of the Cross put a strapping across his bum, and after the first blow, he rolled over on his back, with his front showing. But Sister didn't stop at that. She laced it right across his privates, and the poor boy let out a scream that could be heard all over the dormitory. And Sister hollered, quote, "The longer you lay that way, the longer I'm going to keep whacking." So he rolled back again. She was a sadist. Unquote. On numerous occasions, children were punished, despite being seriously ill. Content warning on this part. Betsy Paul remembers. I used to sit at the same table with Dorothy Doucette. We're reading about the residential school system of Canada to honor Canada's birthday, which was on July 1st. A lot of this applies to the US as well, though, so it applies to July 4th as well. Anyway, Betsy Paul. This is a reminiscent from Betsy Paul. It's about to get much worse. Much, much worse. So again, content warning, but I hope you all listen to what I'm about to say. Rather, what Betsy Paul is about to say. I used to sit at the same table with Dorothy Doucette. She was so sick, she used to puke right in her plate. And Kawoo used to beat her in the mouth with a spoon and stuff the food mixed with vomit right back in her mouth again. While she was pincing her cheeks, Sister Paul of the Cross said, "This girl is sick. Get her to the doctor." And Wikyu answered, "Mind your own business, sister. You look after the boys, and I'll take care of the girls." So, Sister Paul went and reported it to Sister Superior, who came through the scullery door in the back and caught her in the act. Kikyu was dumbfounded. It was learned that this was going on for a week, and that Dorothy was losing weight. Sister Superior called Dr. McGinnis, and Dorothy was quarantined on the 3rd floor in the infirmary because she was diagnosed with having diphtheria. Pug, please don't. Pug out. That was from Betsy Paul. Many of the punishments were meted out almost absent-mindedly. I remember during the late 30s, coming across a little girl huddled in the dark corner under the stairwell in the evening. She told me that she had been there all day. "Will you tell the sister that I'm still here? I've been sitting here all day, since this morning." When I told Wikwu, she said, "Oh my goodness, I forgot all about her. Tell her she can go to bed now." Father McKay introduced boxing for boys, more for its value as a means of intimidation than as a form of recreation. Forced boxing matches were a way of keeping the boys in line. Doug Knockwood remembers, quote, "Gordon Tuplan of Prince Edward Island was the #1 fighter and the champion boxer. And when Andrew Julian from Indian Brook had a disagreement with Gordon at play, he was made to go in the squared circle with him. After 6 rounds, when Father McKay saw that Andrew was winning, he put on Gordon's gloves and stepped into the ring against Andrew. Because of that religious trip, Andrew wouldn't throw a punch. He just tried to protect himself. And finally, he broke down and cried. That was the end of the fight. Father McKay used his position in the church to intimidate because he knew that Indian children were taught that a priest was a holy man and was doing God's work, and he was always right. Therefore, no one should hit a priest. Father McKay used strappings and boxing to demonstrate his power over all the boys in front of the entire school." Unquote. Yes, this is from the Mi'kmaq anthology book. Isaac Knockwood and Angus Cope, who were students during the 40s, were called into Father McKay's office for a minor offense, and the priest hit 15-year-old Angus unexpectedly in the jaw so hard it lifted him right off the floor and knocked him out. Then he hit Isaac, who was the same age. With such force, it made his head spin. Some boys began to develop the notion during World War II that Father McKay might even be in league with the Nazis. Andrew Julian became convinced that Father McKay was part German. And he recalls, quote, "During the war, we listened to the German news by Gabriel Heder on the square radio hanging from the ceiling in the recreation hall. When France was freed, we didn't listen, but we listened to Max Schmeling and Joe Louis championship fight. When Max Schmeling won by knockout, Father McKay was step dancing on the boys' side. He was a good dancer. Sister Adrian served him tea and sandwiches, which he ate in front of the boys. Though there seems to be no evidence that Father McKay was part German, it is not surprising that the young Mi'kmaq boys would develop that belief at the sight of the priest dancing with glee at the defeat of the famous black boxer. Peter Julian was another of the unfortunate students in the dilemma of facing the boxing ring, the priests he had been taught to respect. Peter Julian remembers, quote, "I found the punishments extremely severe. I got punishments and I got beatings. One day I got into a fight with another boy and Father McKay put boxing gloves on both of us. And when I won, Father McKay told me, 'You think you're tough?' And I said, 'No, I don't think I'm tough.' I was 14 years old at the time. Then he put on a pair of boxing gloves, and I had no choice. It was either that or a strapping. He was a big man, and I was only a small boy for my age. Besides, I had respect for him, and I wouldn't hit him. But he made me angry, and I hit him. Then he got mad and knocked me right over on the benches and up against the pillar. It dazed me a little bit, but it didn't knock me out. Then I told the priest, I've had enough. But he forced me to get back in the ring. And again, I felt that I had no choice. I went this far with him and ended up with a lucky punch and hit him in the face. He then ordered the fight stopped and took off his boxing gloves. 'Come with me,' he said, and we went up to his parlor. And we'll find out how tough you really are. Unbuckle your belt and drop your pants and underpants.' I did what he told me, and then he ordered, 'Grasp your ankles.' After which he warned me, 'You're going to get 10 straps right across your bum.' He had a strap about 3 or 4 inches wide. He wrapped that around his hand a couple of times and asked me to bend over. I bent over, and that's when I got it, eh? I spent about 3 days nursing my ass because it was so sore, and I had a lot of bruises. I received many serious beatings after that because if I did something wrong, I was sent directly to Father McKay." Being hit in the face. No, and keep in mind, these are all different people that I'm reading from here, okay? Each time I name somebody, we're getting someone else's contribution to this story. Such as here now, being hit in the face with a priest's fist was not reserved for punishing the boys. As Rita Howe recalls, "I was at school in 1949 when Father McKay was principal. Barbara Paul was not liked by the sisters, and she was severely punished for saying the word so. It was just slang to her, and she didn't really mean anything or point to any particular person when she said it. We were washing the walls in the hallway, and Barbara was standing on a ladder, reaching high when her wash rag fell out of her hands. She said, 'Oh, so,' and Sister heard her and told her not to repeat it again. The following day, Father McKay came into the classroom looking for Barbara. And when she went to the front of the class, she asked her if he had said the word so. And she answered yes. She explained that it was an accident and that she was sorry and promised not to say it again. Then he hauled off and smashed her in the face. Not with an open hand, but with a fist. She fell down, and he told her to get up. She got up again, and he smashed her again, with both fists this time. She went down again, and he ordered her up again. Even pushed some of the desk back to get at her. I think she tried to crawl away, but her nose and mouth were bleeding, and he smashed her again. And he went down, and she went down again, but didn't get up. She tried to sit up halfway. He looked at her and walked out. And it frightened every kid in the school. I was looking at the windows and thinking about jumping out to get away. The classroom was grade 5, and every kid was screaming and crying while the sister just stood there with her arms folded. She didn't do anything. I swear to God, she enjoyed it. Afterward, the sister took Barbara out. I don't know where she took her, but the rest of the day, she wasn't in class. I can see that chubby fist of Father McKay's yet. His hands were fat. It looked like they had a ball of fat on top of them. Ah. That's Rita Howe. Because punishment was often meted out based on hearsay, evidence, ratting on other students, particularly on the boys' side, was a way of working off old scores. One student in the late 1950s recalls that someone telling the nun in charge that you've been heard speaking Mi'kmaq was a way to ensure that you'd get the shit beat out of you. Older boys also intimidated younger ones. You had to pay for protection. You had to watch your bed. They'd piss in your bed to get you in trouble. In the morning, you get the blame, and you'd have to wear the sheet on your head and parade around. Another cruel trick, which came out of the boys, was to loosen the top of the salt shaker, so that the next boy who tried to salt his food would have it covered in salt. Not only was his food spoiled, but everyone knew that the nun would force him to eat the whole plateful, even if he gagged or vomited. My fish has broken for some reason. It seems like. I'll fix it when I'm done. Many students remember the systematic humiliations, which they suffered, at least as vividly as the physical pain. More than 3 decades after the school's closing, many students still feel a sense of violation and shame. One woman recalls that some forms of humiliation were worse than the physical pain of a beating. One day, the girls were climbing on the door onto the roof and sliding down the wall, and I followed them. We were playing Follow the Leader. When I was halfway up, the nun caught me. I was afraid of heights, but I was even more afraid of what was going to happen to me when I came down. What the nun was going to do. The sister had a bat. I saw the bat in her hands. When I was hanging on to the door, she hit me on the bottom with the bat, and I fell to the ground. She hit me again on the arm. The pain was so bad, but I didn't cry. She hit me more than once. I was gritting my teeth, fighting back the crying. But my tears were flowing. It was fear. The most degrading experience in my life was when the sister in charge of the girls lined us up and made us hold our panties in our hands for examination. We used to wash the stains quickly and wear our underwear wet. We didn't know why we were afraid. We were afraid of the unknown. Everything to them was a sin. Nora Bernard recalls that same humiliating inspection of underwear. Quote, I don't know what Sister Webajitmiwu's, the sniffer's, problem was. For instance, she used to have us girls form a line and take the crotch of her panties and spread them on the palm of her hands as we all walked by her, so she could see if they were dirty. She told us that she didn't want us going to church smelly, but why didn't she just have all of us take a bath or shower before church? Rita Howe remembers the nightly sense of dread as she awaited the inevitable humiliation. I dreaded going to bed because I knew she was going to do that. When we got ready for bed, Wijitsu Damuwu, the sniffer, would be watching. Certain time to get her nightdress on and certain time to get into bed. While the kids were crawling into bed, she'd watch who was taking their underwear off. Then she'd go and peek inside of them. We had to take her panties and place them over our clothes at the foot of the bed. Wijitsu would come to the bottom of the bed, and she'd take her underwear and she'd look inside of them. She'd put it back down. She'd go to the next bed, open up the bloomers, and do that about 20 times, which was the number of girls in the dorm. I'd be lying in bed so embarrassed, watching her come closer and waiting till she got to my bed. It was so humiliating that she was invading my privacy. It seemed that we were being punished for something that was never explained. I don't know if she got a kick from looking at the girl's underwear, or was this to embarrass or degrade us, or to make us feel ashamed? During the 1950s, the nun in charge of the girls' side decided that girls would no longer be provided with sanitary towels at night. Only those with exceptionally light periods were able to avoid bleeding onto the sheets. Every morning, the sheets had to be held up for inspection. Some girls remember being sent to wash out the bloodstains. Others were beaten as well. For some girls, being beaten 4 days out of every month became a routine event. Many of the punishments had a sexual character or association. One former student remembers all of the boys being treated for something. Perhaps scabies that, quote, was going around. They got some white medicine in a bottle that they used to spread on her genitals. They would line us up in the bathroom. We could have put it on ourselves, but they preferred to do it. You've got boys, 9, 10, 11. Some of them would get erections, and then the nuns would get mad and beat them. Another student recalls being beaten because he resisted sexual interference. Apparently, he was ill and had blacked out in church. He woke up in back of the dormitory. A nun was sponge bathing me, and she proceeded to go a little too far with her sponge bathing. So I pushed her hand away. She held my legs apart while she strapped the inside of my thighs. I never stopped her again. The same student recalls that other students taught him a form of meditation technique so that he was able to mentally remove himself from what was happening to his body. Some of the other kids told me the secret of how to deal with what was to do was run away to the pipes. When we finished showering, they'd powder you. And sometimes they'd powder your genitals a little too long. Some of the kids that was with me used to tell me, run along to the pipes. In the shower room, there used to be pipes, and he told me to pretend that I'm up there on the pipe. Really think about it. You're crawling down to the end, and then there's just dust. And then you meet the joints, the elbow. One pipe would be too hot, so you don't go down there, you go down the other one. By the time you'd finish traveling the pipes, usually the act is over. That's how I learned to cope with it, by running away to the pipes. Offering more definite resistance was riskier. One student recalls a priest or a brother invoking religion to try to persuade him to perform oral sex. I was only a 9-year-old kid. I didn't know whether he was a priest or a brother. He had on a black gown, that outfit that they always wear. He told me that he works for God, that God is his friend, and if I did things for him, then God would take me to heaven. I remember he opened a drawer. He was standing next to his desk, and he opened a drawer and put his leg up there. He had nothing on underneath. I could see his face, his hairy legs. I wouldn't. So he strapped me and told me I was going to hell. Most of those who were students at the school have exceptionally vivid memories of the instruments of punishment, as well as the particular incidents when they were used. Nora Bernard describes the main instrument of punishment during the 40s as, quote, a strap made out of leather, which was about 2 or 3 inches wide and a little over 2 feet long. Yvette Toney, who was a pupil in the late 50s, remembered that the strap during those years was a piece cut from a rubber mat on the floor, leading to the back door. It was about 4 inches wide and 18 inches long. The noticeable gap in the mat. Mama, thank you so much for the raid. Very much appreciate that.
What are you, from the Department of Noam Sands? You taking a Noam census? You counting my Noam Sands?
Thank you so much. Welcome in, Mama and Media. We're just reading about Canada's residential school history. I'll just read this part about the 50 strap again. Yvette Toney, who was a pupil in the late 50s, remembers that the strap during those years was a piece cut from the rubber mat on the floor leading to the back door. It was about 4 inches wide and 18 inches long. The noticeable gap in the mat served as a constant reminder every time the children went out and came in from play of the potential punishment that constantly awaited them. Other straps made of different materials seem to have been in use earlier on. And everybody, make sure you're following my comrade Mama on all the platforms. Lennon, thank you so much for the subby. Other straps made of different materials seem to have been in use earlier on. One man recalls, I was ordered to polish floors, and Sister Superior opened the closet where the polisher was kept. The strap was hanging on a hook behind the door. I touched it, and it had a good grip, a wooden handle. It was about 4 inches wide and about 16 inches long, and a little thicker than my belt, and it was cut into strips. It looked like a piece from a conveyor belt from the lumber mill, and it was used by Mr. McLeod, the school handyman, and Father McKay when they lashed the boys. Oh my god, Lennon Smash! Thank you so much, comrade. Very much appreciate your support. Thank you, Lennon, for dropping a 5-bomb on us. That means a ton, comrade. Thank you.
I've got some literature in my car.
That means a ton, comrade. Thank you. NTC, thank you for the resubby as well. Oh, yes. Another man recalls being ordered to destroy one of the straps immediately before a visit from the school inspectors. I was a furnace hand, and Sister Superior came down with a brown paper bag tucked under her cape. She told me that the inspectors came from Ottawa.
This guy's a commie!
NTC, thank you for the gift sub. Thank you for the gift sub to Mama. Very much appreciate that. Thank you. I was a furnace hand, and Sister Superior came down with a brown paper bag tucked under her cape. She told me that inspectors came from Ottawa, and would I please burn this paper bag and its contents.
Call me,
Holy shit! NTC, thank you for the 5 gift subs over here. Thank you, comrade. Thank you, Chad. That means a ton. When I took the bag from her, she turned around quick and started going up the stairs leading to the laundry. Then she stopped and looked at me and said, "Don't look in the bag, just burn it." Soon as she got out of sight, I peeked in the bag, and there were 3 whips in it. They were cut into strips with a knot tied in the end, the kind you could send away for in a farmer's catalog. In the classroom, the ever-present instruments of punishment was the pointer. Every time the sister came beside me, I ducked, because I was afraid she was going to hit me with the pointer. Nancy Marble, who became a student a year after the school was founded, was hit on the head with the pointer so frequently, by the time she was 14, she had lost her hearing. Betsy Paul's memories are similar. How many times did I get hit over the head with that pointer? That was Sketchamu's class, where she hit me so hard she even broke the pointer. And oh my god, my head used to be so sore. And I couldn't communicate with anyone in the outside world because our letters telling about the mistreatment were read and we were told, "How dare you complain to anyone about this school and how you were treated here? Some of you are lucky you have a roof over your head." Even when they had nothing in their hands, those in charge had ways of physically punishing children, which are still bitterly remembered. Ears were a favorite target. One man remembers the intense pain. "Jesus, I used to hate them ear pulls. Your ears will feel like you were going to pop off. It would hurt right to the center core. They used to to pull the ears and twist." I remember that a number of children used to have nearly permanent sores at the tops and bottoms of their ears as a result of this technique of pulling and twisting ears. It seems that the nun's hands could flash out with amazing speed and grasp a handful of hair from behind, jerking the child's head back with a quick whiplash. Her fingers could grab a piece of loose skin on the face or throat and startle the victim with the sudden intense pain of pinching and twisting. Another form of punishment was to be locked alone in a room. One girl became so tired of being locked in the bathroom after a day that she had managed to take off the door hinges, and even swallowed the screws in a desperate attempt to prevent the door from being replaced. And her punishment repeated. Much of the time, children were being punished not for deliberate naughtiness, but for behavior that would have been avoided if they could. Wetting the bed was considered a major crime. Besides the usual strappings, they were humiliated in front of everyone. Alice Paul remembers Dorothy made a sand on the table while the nun asked her, "Does sister like you?" And when she answered no, the nun asked, "Why?" The little girl replied, "I peed the bed." Nora Bernard's brother was systematically humiliated for bedwetting. My brother had a problem of bedwetting. They forced him to put on a girl's dress and parade him in refectory in front of all the children. And me and my sisters had to sit there and watch his humiliation. I don't know why I didn't run away. Maybe it's because I was the oldest in the family and had to look out for my brothers and sisters. The most enduring and unyielding law was the one that forbade the speaking of Mi'kmaq. Even during play, none of the nuns knew any Mi'kmaq or made any effort to learn it besides 2 words: Talia, priest, and the term for nun, Enya. Aniap is a corruption of Aniepsit, which means to ask forgiveness. And Niepnusiku, which means a woman who goes around asking for forgiveness. While the word for priest has its roots in the French word for padre. Mi'kmaq was the only language understood by nearly all the students when they first came to the school. The few students who were not fluent in Mi'kmaq generally had non-native mothers, or had gone to white schools off the reserves. By the time they were discharged, most of the students had lost their language. Nancy Marble says, "We weren't allowed to talk Indian. Sister just told me that I wasn't allowed. And when I told her I couldn't speak English, she told me that I had to learn. After a while, I caught on, I guess. But I even forgot my prayers in Indian. Some people still pray in Indian, but not very many." Joe Julian remembers. "I got tired of being hit over the head, so I thought I better stop talking Indian and learn English." I don't know what they were. Were they prejudiced or sadists? They liked to inflict pain? They thought we were savages from the wild? And it took me a long time to find myself. I used to work with white people sailing on the Great Sea, but still I can't trust them. I still don't. That's just the way I feel. One day during my first year, I came into the recreation hall to find Wiku slapping a little girl and yelling at her. The nun had the little girl backed up, and the presses, which were just shelves where we kept shoes, mitts, and our precious junk boxes. The little girl was looking in her junk box when the nun came up from behind her and swung her around and began beating her up. From where I was standing, by the toilet door, I could see the nun's back. Her arms were swinging. At first, the nun's size obstructed my view, but it was also blocked the girl's escape. When Wiku hit her right hand, her black veil swung left, and when she slapped the right, the veil went in the opposite direction. I could see the girl's feet. At first, she was standing with both feet on the floor. Then the sister pinched her cheeks, and her lips were drawn taut, across her teeth, and her eyes wide with terror. I stood hypnotized with fear. I'd never been so scared in my whole life before, and I almost voided a puddle right there on the spot. Then, the nun picked the little girl clear off the floor by the ears or hair, and the girl stood on the tiptoes with her feet dangling in the air, so that one of her shoes fell off. The nun was yelling, "You bad, bad girl." Then she let go with one hand and continued slapping her in the mouth until her nose bled. The little girl was still holding her junk box, while tears and drops of blood were falling in it. Wiku hit the box, and the girl's precious possessions went flying in every direction onto the floor. Suddenly, Wiku turned around and screeched at us, who were standing, paralyzed with fear. "Get out, you little savages, and don't let me hear anyone else talking that mumbo-jumbo again." We all went scrambling up the cement steps that led into the yard. Out of nowhere came Susie. She pushed me gently and firmly out the door. I couldn't even imagine what the little girl had done. When we got out of hearing from everyone else, she told me, "Don't talk Mi'kmaq. Aniap has spies." The next day, I saw the little girl. She had bruises on both cheeks and on her throat where Wiku had punched her, and her lips were swollen with a cut on the upper one. When one of the little friends tried to comfort her, Wiku called out, "Get away from her! She's a bad girl, and if I see you near her again, I'll give you the same thing." When little children first arrived at the school, we would see bruises on their throats and cheeks. that told us that they had been caught speaking Mi'kmaq. Once we saw the bruises begin to fade, we knew they stopped talking. Although many of those who relentlessly punished the children entrusted to them are now dead, the effect of their savage punishments has outlived them. Not only were the little children brutally punished for speaking their mother tongue, reducing them to years of speechlessness, but the Mi'kmaq language was constantly referred to as mumbo jumbo, as if it were some form of gibberish. The ruthless banning of Mi'kmaq in the school drove a wedge between family members. Frida Simon, for example, remembers that when she arrived at the school 2 years after her older sister, they were completely unable to communicate with one another, since Frida spoke only Mi'kmaq, and her sister spoke only English. The punishment for speaking Mi'kmaq began on our first day at school, and the punishment has continued all of our lives as we try to piece together who we are and what the world means to us with the language many of us have had to relearn as adults. And that's the segment from Out of the Darkness I wanted to share with you today.
Juche is what's happening on this planet, y'all.
I want to share one last poem with you before we wrap up this segment. One last poem I want to share with you before we wrap up this segment right here is just this poem. This is by Catherine Sorby. Ni nan Mi'kmaq je. I am Mi'kmaq. I am a Mi'kmaq. In the east is where my roots are. My skin is reddish. You, the creator, up above, you see this. When will I no longer doubt myself? I am a Mi'kmaq. Through me, the Micmac heritage flows. It has been around for thousands of years. You, the creator, up above, you know this. When will I no longer doubt myself? I am Mi'kmaq. My language speaks from the heart, and I continue to live off the earth. You, creator up above, you understand this. When will I no longer doubt myself? I am a Mi'kmaq. I live just once in this world. I look to my children to carry on what I started. When you, the creator, call me, that shall be the one thing I do not doubt.